Hey everyone! Tonight's journey takes us deep into the strange and shadowy corners of the Middle Ages. Not the polished world of knights and glittering courts, but the whispers, the legends villagers told by firelight, the stories scrawled in the margins of old manuscripts, the mysteries that refuse to die. Across medieval Europe, tales spread of dancing plagues, vanishing children, ghostly ships, and miracles that turned out to be unsettlingly real. These weren't just bedtime stories. They were urban legends that shook entire communities, many of which history later confirmed in the strangest of ways. Before we set off on this eerie historical path, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy these late-night dives into the past. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see this little community gathering from all over the world. Now dim the lights. Maybe let a fan hum softly in the background and settle in as we wander together through 15 medieval urban legends that turned out to be true and more. The Rat King of Hamelin, truth behind the Pied Piper. A town on the edge. You are standing in the heart of Hamelin, a modest medieval town nestled along the Weser River in what is now Lower Saxony, Germany. The year is 1284, a date carved into local memory with quiet dread. Hamelin is not a bustling medieval metropolis. It is a small trading town with cobbled lanes, half-timbered houses, and the distinct smell of river water mingled with bread ovens and livestock. Its economy depends on the rhythm of the river, the grain harvest, and the slow trickle of travelers passing through on their way to larger towns like Hanover. The town's layout follows a typical medieval pattern. A market square at the center, surrounded by merchants' homes and stalls, while narrow alleys radiate outward toward the defensive wall. The wall itself is not a grand fortification, but a modest stone barrier intended more to keep out wild animals and petty thieves than invading armies. Beyond the wall stretch farmlands, with wheat fields swaying in the breeze and pigs rooting in the forest undergrowth. Daily life is uneventful, even monotonous. At dawn, the town crier's bell echoes through the mist. Bakers fire their ovens, coopers roll barrels to the docks, and children carry water from the communal well. You can almost hear the scrape of wooden buckets on stone, the soft murmur of morning prayers, and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer. This rhythm has continued for generations, with little to disturb it. But beneath this seemingly calm surface, a problem is spreading. A problem with sharp teeth and twitching whiskers. The rat infestation. Rats have always been present in medieval towns, feeding on grain stores, scraps, and refuse. But in the early 1280s, Hamelin begins to notice something unusual. The rats are multiplying beyond control. Grain sacks are found shredded, loaves of bread half-eaten by morning, and even candles gnawed to the wick. At first, the townspeople grumble and set crude traps. Cats are encouraged, and some families even keep ferrets to hunt in the walls. But this is no ordinary infestation. The rats begin appearing in places they shouldn't be. Inside the church, in the brewery cellars, even climbing the ropes of the town bell tower. Chroniclers later described rats emerging from the river as if summoned, swimming in droves toward the town's edge. Farmers complain that rats have overrun the fields, eating seedlings before they sprout. Bakers speak of losing entire batches of flour overnight. It is not a sudden catastrophe, but a creeping, daily erosion of food security. In a world where every grain matters, this infestation is not a mere nuisance. It is a threat to survival. A bad harvest combined with spoiled grain can mean famine by winter. The town council convenes repeatedly, debating solutions. But there is no centralized pest control in the 13th century. Each household is expected to handle its own vermin. The wealthier merchants protect their storerooms with stone and iron, while the poor rely on cats and prayer. Hamelin's political landscape. To understand what happens next, you must understand how medieval towns functioned. Hamelin is technically under the authority of local lords but enjoys a degree of self-governance through its town council, a body of respected male citizens, typically merchants and guild members, who decide on matters like market regulation, defenses, and communal works. These councils are practical but notoriously slow. They value tradition and consensus over innovation. The infestation exposes fractures in the town's political structure. Wealthy merchants, whose storerooms are secure, argue that the problem is exaggerated. Artisans and farmers, who are losing their food, demand immediate action. There are whispered accusations. Perhaps the millers are hoarding grain. Perhaps outsiders brought the rats through trade. Fear breeds suspicion. And then, into this tension, a stranger arrives. The Pied Piper enters. Accounts of the Pied Piper vary, but most agree on certain details. He is described as a tall, thin man wearing a coat of many colors. Pied, meaning variegated. He carries with him a flute or pipe, and he claims he can rid Hamelin of its rat problem for a price. In a medieval town, such a claim is both bizarre and strangely plausible. Traveling specialists were common. Leech collectors, itinerant surgeons, alchemists, rat catchers, and entertainers. Many relied on a mix of skill, superstition, and showmanship. Rat catchers often used trained dogs or ferrets, poisons made of arsenic or herbs, or traps of ingenious design. But no one in Hamelin has seen anything quite like this man. The town council listens. He offers to eliminate every rat within the walls of Hamelin in exchange for a handsome sum of guilders. The amount is debated, but eventually a deal is struck. The contract is verbal, as was common, but witnesses note the agreement. Payment will be given once the rats are gone. The event. On a cool spring morning, the piper begins his work. Standing at the edge of the market square, he raises his flute and plays a tune. Chroniclers, centuries later, describe the sound as sweet and strange, unlike any melody heard before. Within moments, rats begin to emerge from every corner, from cellars, from beneath floorboards, from granaries, and from the riverbanks. They gather in the streets, forming a moving, chittering mass. People watch from windows and rooftops, astonished and terrified. The piper walks through the streets, still playing, leading the swarm like a shepherd with his flock. Step by step, he leads them toward the river Weser. There, without hesitation, the rats follow him into the water. Some say he walked onto a sandbar, others that he stopped at the bank. In any case, the rats plunge into the river and drown by the thousands. Within hours, Hamelin is eerily quiet. The scratching in the walls is gone. Grain stores are safe. The miracle, or trick, is complete. Historical interpretations. Modern historians debate what really happened. Some suggest that the piper was an actual rat catcher, using sounds to direct trained ferrets or dogs. Others believe he employed some form of ultrasonic whistle, though this stretches medieval plausibility. Some point to the possibility that the rats died from poisoning, and the piper merely orchestrated the spectacle to claim credit. Another possibility is that the entire rat episode was a later embellishment, added to explain a more tragic historical event, the disappearance of Hamelin's children, recorded on a stained glass window, now lost, from the 14th century. According to this record, on June 26, 1284, 130 children of Hamelin were led away by a mysterious figure and never returned. The rat story may have been grafted onto this event later, transforming a tragedy into a cautionary legend. Life after the Piper. For a brief time, Hamelin returns to its routine. Bakers bake, farmers sow, and the town crier rings his bell. But beneath the surface, a new tension builds. The Piper returns to the council to collect his reward. The councilors, seeing that the rats are gone, decide to cheat him. Perhaps they claim the rats were leaving anyway. Perhaps they offer him less than agreed. Medieval chroniclers are vague, but the essence is clear. The Piper is denied full payment. It is here that the legend shifts from a tale of pest control to one of revenge and loss. What happens next will echo through Hamelin's history for centuries, whispered by candlelight and painted on church walls. But for now, the town sleeps, unaware of the price it will soon pay. And so, you might wonder, what happens when a town breaks its promise to someone who holds an uncanny power over its children? The day the children vanished. It is the morning of June 26, 1284, and the town of Hamelin stirs to life, as it always does. Bakers rise before dawn to knead their dough, millers haul sacks of grain, and merchants arrange their stalls in the market square. Yet something in the air feels different, a quiet tension, a restless unease that has been growing since the Piper's job was completed. The rat infestation, once a daily terror, is now little more than a memory. But the Piper, the man in the multicolored coat, has not left town. For days he has been seen wandering Hamelin's alleys and peripheries, watching. Some say he lingers near the council hall, others that he walks along the riverbank, staring into the current as if contemplating some invisible horizon. He is waiting to be paid. A broken promise. The town council, composed of Hamelin's wealthier and more influential men, meets behind closed doors to decide the Piper's fate. They know the agreement was verbal, but it was witnessed by respected townsfolk. Payment is expected, yet the council has grown reluctant. Some argue the Piper's work was a trick. Perhaps the rats would have left on their own. Others claim the fee he demanded is too high, that the town can't spare that much silver without endangering its coffers. There's also something else, pride. Hamelin does not want to be seen as gullible. Paying a wandering stranger a small fortune for playing a flute would make them appear foolish to neighboring towns. And so, through a mixture of arrogance and financial caution, the council decides to refuse full payment. They offer the Piper a reduced amount, a token, not the agreed sum. According to later accounts, he rejects it without a word and walks away. In medieval society, contracts and honor carry immense weight. A broken oath is not merely a financial slight. It is a moral and spiritual offense. And when that oath is broken against someone who seems to command unnatural power, it plants a seed of fear, one that will soon grow. Medieval childhood in Hamelin. To understand the impact of what happens next, it helps to picture what childhood in Hamelin actually looked like in the late 13th century. Children are not separated from adult life in the way modern societies imagine. From the age of 5 or 6, most children are expected to help with household chores or apprenticeships. They fetch water, collect firewood, tend to animals, and learn their parents' trades. There are no schools in the modern sense. The few literate children belong to wealthy families and may be educated by monks or clerks. Children gather in groups when chores are done, playing simple games with pebbles, chasing each other around the market square, or carving toys from scraps of wood. They are visible everywhere, part of the town's living rhythm. So when something happens to them, it is immediately noticed. The pipers return. Later that same day, while the council's decision circulates in hushed whispers, the piper appears again. But this time, he is dressed differently. Gone is the flamboyant multicolored coat that once dazzled the townsfolk. Instead, he wears a dark green hunting outfit, simple but finely made, and a strange red hat with a feather that catches the morning light. Chroniclers say he looks both foreign and familiar, as if he has shed one skin for another. Carrying his flute, he walks to the center of Hamelin, near the church and marketplace. It is around midday, when most adults are occupied with work. Without announcement or ceremony, he raises the flute to his lips and begins to play again. But this time, the sound is different. Whereas the earlier tune had a brisk, lively quality, enough to entice rats from their hiding places, this melody is described in later texts as sweet and melancholy, like a distant lullaby carried on the wind. Its notes seem to flow through the air like water, slipping into every open window and doorway. The children follow. One by one, the children of Hamelin stop what they are doing. Those fetching water set down their buckets. Those sweeping floors pause mid-motion. Those playing in the streets turn their heads toward the sound. Slowly, as if entranced, they begin to walk toward the piper. Witnesses describe it as a quiet procession, not a chaotic rush. The children do not run or shout. They simply follow, eyes fixed on the piper, their small feet pattering against the cobblestones. Older townsfolk call out to them, confused, but receive no reply. Some mothers try to pull their children back, but the children resist gently, slipping free of their grasp as if drawn by an invisible thread. In total, 130 children follow the piper through the streets of Hamelin. They pass the church, the council hall, the market, and finally the town gate, which stands open to the surrounding countryside. No one stops them. Perhaps people assume it is some strange form of entertainment. Perhaps they hesitate because the piper's earlier act had seemed miraculous, and they fear interfering. Whatever the reason, no one acts in time. The mountain, outside the town, stands a low, grassy hill, sometimes referred to in the chronicles as the Koppenberg. It is a place where children often play and shepherds graze their flocks. On this day, the piper leads the procession straight toward it. Here, accounts diverge. One version claims that when the piper reaches the mountain, a great door suddenly opens in its side, and he leads the children through it. Another says that the children simply vanish behind the hill, never to be seen again. The most commonly repeated version is that the hill itself swallows them, closing behind them with a sound like distant thunder. Only 3 children are said to have returned, one blind, one deaf, and one lame, each of whom, for different reasons, could not keep pace with the others. Their testimonies, recorded generations later, form the basis of the legend. They describe a glowing light inside the hill and the sound of music growing ever fainter as the piper and their companions disappeared. Hamelin's reaction. Panic spreads quickly through the town. Parents run through the streets calling their children's names. The town crier rings the bell frantically, summoning everyone to the square. The council members, realizing what has happened, send riders to neighboring villages. thinking perhaps the children have been taken by bandits or have wandered off. But no trace is found. In a medieval town, the disappearance of over 100 children is not just a tragedy. It is a disaster on multiple levels. These children represent future labor, future guild members, future families. Their sudden loss threatens the social and economic structure of Hamelin itself. More than that, it is seen as a divine judgment. In an age where misfortune is often attributed to sin or broken oaths, the connection between the broken promise to the piper and the vanishing of the children is clear in everyone's mind. Interpreting the legend, historians have puzzled over this event for centuries. The earliest written reference dates to around 1300, found in the Hamelin Town Chronicle, which simply states, "In the year of our Lord 1284, on the 26th of June, by a piper, clothed in many kinds of colors, 130 children born in Hamelin were seduced and lost at the place of execution near the hill." Notably, the rats are not mentioned in this earliest record. The rat episode seems to have been added in the 16th century, possibly to make the story more moralistic or entertaining. But the disappearance itself appears to have been a real historical memory, commemorated by a stained glass window installed in Hamelin's church, later destroyed in 1660, which depicted the piper and the children in procession. Various theories have emerged to explain it. Migration theory. Some historians suggest the children were not kidnapped, but led away as part of a migration to Eastern Europe. During this period, German settlers were invited eastward to colonize less populated regions. The piper may have been a recruiter or leader of such a group, and the music a metaphor for his persuasive power. Children's Crusade theory. Others connect the event to the Children's Crusade of 1212, when groups of young people set off on religious journeys that ended in tragedy. The Hamelin children may have joined a similar expedition and perished. Natural disaster or disease. Another possibility is that the children died from a plague, landslide, or accident, and the piper's story emerged as a way to make sense of collective trauma. Whatever the explanation, the event is remembered with solemnity. For centuries, Hamelin commemorated June 26th with a day of mourning. Street performances, songs, and poems kept the story alive. Echoes in the town. As evening falls on that fateful day, Hamelin is transformed. The streets that once echoed with children's laughter are silent. Parents weep in doorways. The town council meets again, but this time there are no debates, only despair. The piper is gone, and with him, the children. The chronicler of Hamelin writes simply, "After this event, there was great grief in the town. Many years passed, and the story was not forgotten. The empty cradles, the abandoned toys, the half-finished apprenticeships, they remain like ghosts in the town's fabric, reminders of a promise broken and a price paid." And yet, centuries later, historians still ask, where did the children go, and why was their story forever entwined with the rats? Echoes through the centuries. The story of the vanished children does not end in 1284. In many ways, it begins there, not only as a historical mystery, but as a legend that echoes through centuries, carried by the memory of a single inexplicable event. As Hamelin moves through time, from medieval obscurity to early modernity, the tale of the piper becomes both a warning and a puzzle, whispered across Europe, painted on glass, carved in wood, and retold in dozens of languages. Life in Hamelin after the disappearance. For decades after that fateful summer day, Hamelin is marked by absence. The town that once rang with children's laughter becomes quiet, its demographics permanently altered. Many of the vanished were the eldest children of families, heirs to trades, apprentices in guilds, future heads of households. Their sudden loss creates a ripple effect through the economy and the structure of the community. Guild masters are left without apprentices. Farmers face a shortage of hands to work the fields. Families who lost their children sink into grief that alters daily life. In medieval society, where every child contributes materially, their absence is not only emotional but economic. Some families leave Hamelin altogether, seeking new lives elsewhere. Others remain, but live in a state of perpetual mourning. Chroniclers note that for decades afterward, no festivities or dancing were allowed on June 26th. This day becomes a solemn commemoration. Weddings are not held, bells remain silent, and work is done quietly. In a society that marks time through feasts and saints' days, this annual silence is extraordinary, a civic ritual of collective remembrance. The piper in art and record. The earliest written mention, as noted earlier, comes from around 1300, less than 20 years after the event. But the most striking evidence of how seriously Hamelin took the story is the stained glass window that once adorned the town's church. It depicted the piper, dressed in bright clothing, leading children away. While the original glass was destroyed in 1660, written descriptions survive from church records and visitors. This window is not a fairy tale embellishment, it is a memorial. In a world where stained glass is used to depict saints and biblical scenes, to give such prominent space to a local event speaks volumes. The piper, in this form, is not just a folkloric figure. He is an actor in Hamelin's civic history, as real to them as any king or bishop. Other records emerge, legal documents that refer to the time after the children went away, indicating that this disappearance became a chronological marker for official affairs. It's similar to how some communities date events relative to great fires or floods. The loss becomes part of how Hamelin measures its own history. Migration and colonization, a historical hypothesis. By the 14th century, Germany experiences waves of eastward migration. Landlords and princes in Eastern Europe, in what is now Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and beyond, invite settlers to cultivate and develop sparsely populated lands. These movements are often led by locators, individuals who recruit groups of settlers and lead them to new lands, sometimes hundreds of kilometers away. Some historians believe that the piper was one of these locators. The music may not have been literal but metaphorical, representing his persuasive speeches, promises of fertile land, and freedom from local taxes. The children, in this interpretation, were actually young adults or adolescents, perhaps labeled children of Hamelin as a collective term for townsfolk, not literal minors. The mountain that opened may refer to a mountain pass, a journey eastward through difficult terrain. Over time, as memories blur and oral traditions reshape details, a historical migration becomes a myth of enchantment and loss. This theory gains some support from place names in Eastern Europe that resemble Hamelin or Hamelner, suggesting that settlers from the Weser region did indeed establish new communities further east. Religious and moral interpretations. In medieval Europe, unexplained tragedies are rarely left uninterpreted. Hamelin's clergy framed the piper story as a moral warning, a punishment for the town's greed, dishonesty, and pride. By breaking their promise to the piper, the townsfolk broke their moral covenant and paid the price with their children. Sermons in Hamelin throughout the 14th and 15th centuries reportedly referenced the event as a cautionary tale against perjury and false promises. Over time, this moral lens merges with folkloric imagery, transforming the piper from a mysterious stranger into a supernatural agent, sometimes a devil, sometimes a spirit of vengeance, sometimes an angel testing human virtue. The rats enter the story. Interestingly, the rats, now the most famous part of the legend, are a late addition. The first versions of the story focus solely on the disappearance of the children. It is only in the 16th century, over 250 years later, that writers begin to add a prelude involving rats. One of the earliest known rat-augmented versions appears in the Chronicle of Jobus Fincelius, 1556, who cast the piper as both rat-catcher and avenger. Why this edition? There are several possibilities. Storytelling appeal. A rat infestation followed by a miraculous solution is a dramatic way to set up the piper's role and make the story more memorable for oral and printed retellings. Moralization. The rats introduce a clearer sense of quid pro quo. The piper does something good, is cheated, and retaliates. This structure resembles medieval morality tales, where actions have direct consequences. Symbolism. Rats are powerful symbols of sin, corruption, and divine punishment in Christian medieval thought. Linking them to Hamelin's betrayal casts the event as cosmically ordained retribution. Once introduced, the rat element spreads rapidly through Europe. By the 17th century, nearly every retelling features the rats, and the piper becomes primarily known as the rat-catcher of Hamelin. What may have started as a specific local tragedy morphs into a morality fable suitable for sermons, plays, and children's cautionary tales. The piper in broader European culture. By the early modern period, Hamelin's piper has entered the pan-European folklore network. Traveling storytellers carry the tale to neighboring regions, adapting details to local sensibilities. In some versions, the piper plays a bagpipe rather than a flute. In others, he leads not children but townspeople or animals. Some versions shift the date or location entirely. The story is printed in broadsheets and chapbooks, cheaply made pamphlets that circulate widely. It appears in the writings of the brothers Grimm, who collect a version that closely resembles the one now widely known. English travelers in the 17th century bring the story back to their homeland, where it inspires poets and eventually children's books. What began as a local historical trauma becomes a European cultural legend, shaped by centuries of retelling, moralizing, and artistic interpretation. Hamelin's landscape as a living memory. Even centuries later, the landscape of Hamelin bears traces of the story. Streets that the children supposedly walked down become memorial routes. One particular lane, called Bungelosenstrasse, often translated as the street without drums or street without music, is said to mark the piper's procession. For centuries, music and dancing were forbidden on this street as a mark of respect. Tourists and pilgrims visit Hamelin to see the sites associated with the legend: the church, the Weser River, the market square, and the mountain where the children disappeared. Merchants sell trinkets, pilgrims light candles, and local guides tell the story in increasingly elaborate forms. Yet for all its folkloric flourishes, the sense of solemnity persists. Unlike many medieval legends that become humorous over time, the piper story remains tinged with mystery and sadness. The town treats it less as a fairy tale than as a collective inheritance, something both claimed and mourned. The historical silence. One of the most haunting aspects of the Hamelin story is the historical silence that surrounds it. There are no contemporary eyewitness accounts, no letters from neighboring towns, no external chronicles describing the mass disappearance. The story exists almost entirely within Hamelin's own memory, inscribed in its church, its legal documents, and its oral tradition. Why the silence? Some historians speculate that if the event was a planned migration, there may have been no disappearance to outsiders, simply a group of settlers leaving as part of a broader movement. Others suggest that if it was a tragedy, perhaps a landslide or disease outbreak, Hamelin may have suppressed the details out of shame or fear of divine judgment. Whatever the reason, this silence acts like a fog, allowing later generations to project their fears, morals, and imaginations onto the event. Over time, the Piper becomes less a historical figure and more a symbol of broken promises, lost innocence, and the thin line between ordinary life and the inexplicable. A legend without resolution. Today, the Piper remains one of Europe's most enduring medieval legends precisely because it refuses to be fully explained. Each theory, migration, crusade, disaster, supernatural punishment, explains part of the story but leaves something unsolved. The figure of the Piper himself is a blank canvas. He can be a recruiter, a devil, a musician, a murderer, or a folk hero, depending on who tells the tale. And perhaps this is why the story has lasted so long. It sits between history and myth, between fact and allegory, resisting closure. Like the sound of a distant flute on a foggy morning, it draws us in but never quite reveals itself. And as you picture the quiet streets of Hamelin centuries ago, you might ask yourself, was this the story of a single man, or of a community trying to make sense of something too large, too strange, to ever truly understand? Reflections, lessons, and the long shadow of a legend. The story of the Pied Piper has traveled across more than 7 centuries, shifting shape as it moves through time. From a local tragedy in Hamelin to a pan-European moral tale, to a modern cultural symbol of betrayal and mystery, it has endured because it occupies a unique space, half history, half haunting. Now, as we close this story, it's worth stepping back to examine not only what may have happened, but why this legend matters, then and now. Hamelin's enduring memory. By the 17th century, Hamelin has changed dramatically. Trade routes shift, the Reformation sweeps through Germany, and new architectural styles replace older medieval structures. Yet the memory of the Piper remains embedded in the town's identity. Visitors note the seriousness with which locals refer to the day the children went away. Travelers are shown the Bungalow Sintstrasse, the street without music, where no instruments are played out of respect. They are told about the lost children, the Piper, and the broken promise. By this point, the rat episode has fully fused with the original story, and Hamelin is known far and wide as the town of the rat catcher. Merchants capitalize on this reputation by selling Piper-themed goods, but the local population treats the tale with a certain gravity. Even in the Age of Enlightenment, when many medieval legends are dismissed as superstition, Hamelin preserves the Piper story not as a myth to be mocked, but as an event to be remembered. In a world where most medieval towns leave little behind but ruins and church records, Hamelin's story becomes its cultural legacy. Its streets and rituals function as a kind of living historical archive, preserving communal memory long after physical evidence has faded. Lessons about trust and contracts. One of the clearest through lines of the Piper story is the theme of broken promises. At its core, the tale is about a deal struck and not honored, a community that benefits from someone's extraordinary action but refuses to pay what was agreed. In medieval society, verbal contracts carry immense weight, especially in small towns where reputation is currency. A broken oath is more than a legal issue. It is a moral failing with consequences believed to echo into the spiritual realm. The piper's revenge, whether metaphorical or literal, serves as a warning about the dangers of pride and greed. Medieval sermons draw upon this theme. Failing to keep one's word invites divine or supernatural punishment. Even today, the story resonates as a parable about trust, accountability, and communal responsibility. In the absence of written law enforcement or modern contracts, the stories serve to remind communities that a promise made is a promise binding. Social vulnerability and collective trauma. Another striking element of the story is the vulnerability of children in medieval towns. They are both the future workforce and the emotional heart of the community. Their sudden disappearance represents a communal trauma so profound that it becomes immortalized in glass, ritual, and song. Whether the children were led away by a recruiter, lost to disaster, or truly spirited off by a mysterious figure, the event shook Hamelin's foundations. Modern historians studying the Piper story often frame it in terms of collective trauma. Communities throughout history have experienced events, epidemics, mass migrations, unexplained disappearances that defy easy explanation. Over time, these events are mythologized, both as a coping mechanism and as a means of transmitting cultural memory. Myths give structure to chaos. They turn pain into narrative and narrative into tradition. Hamelin's legend may well be one of the earliest recorded examples of this process in Europe. An unexplained event turned into a multi-layered legend, blending history, morality, folklore, and civic identity. The Piper as a cultural archetype. Beyond Hamelin, the Pied Piper becomes an archetype. He represents the figure who offers solutions but demands a price. He is the outsider, the liminal character who straddles the line between savior and destroyer. Across cultures, similar figures appear: tricksters, enchanters, wandering saints, even plague doctors. The Piper is neither fully evil nor fully good. He is a mirror, reflecting the moral choices of the society that encounters him. In literature and art, this archetype resonates deeply. Writers and poets reinterpret the Piper's story to fit new contexts. Robert Browning's famous 1842 poem, The Pied Piper of Hamelin, written for children, solidifies the English-speaking world's version of the tale, complete with the rats and the Piper's musical revenge. Browning ends the poem with a chilling moral: keep your promises or face the consequences. Later, romantic poets, symbolists, and even modern novelists use the Piper as a metaphor for charismatic leaders, mass movements, or cultural change that lures people away from the familiar toward the unknown. He becomes a symbol of both seduction and betrayal, equally capable of leading people to paradise or doom. Historical silence as a space for imagination. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Hamelin story is the absence of concrete historical evidence. We have no contemporary eyewitness records, no external chronicles, and no precise explanation. All that remains are Hamelin's own inscriptions, the church window, and references in later chronicles. This silence acts as fertile ground for imagination. Every generation that encounters the story fills in the gaps according to its own fears and fascinations. In the medieval period, the piper is a divine avenger. In the Renaissance, he becomes a clever rat catcher tricked by the greedy. In the Romantic era, he is a mysterious artist figure whose music transcends the mundane. In the modern era, he is often read as a symbol of mass persuasion, from cult leaders to propagandists. This adaptability is precisely what has kept the legend alive. The less a story is nailed down by evidence. Folklore meets history. The Piper story occupies a rare space where folklore and history intertwine seamlessly. Many medieval legends are clearly fictional, involving dragons, saints performing miracles, or moral allegories. But the Piper legend begins with a real date, a specific town, and a recorded event: the disappearance of 130 children from Hamelin on June 26, 1284. From this solid anchor point, folklore blooms outward. The rats, the flute, the mountain that opens, and the revenge motif are all narrative additions layered atop that historical kernel. This interplay between fact and myth is what gives the story its haunting quality. Unlike purely fictional tales, the Piper legend asks to be believed, at least in part. Modern resonance. Today, Hamelin embraces its legend, but with a careful balance between tourism and remembrance. Visitors can watch costume performances of the Piper leading rats through the streets. The town hosts festivals celebrating its medieval heritage. Yet plaques and markers still remind visitors of the historical gravity of the story, that this is not merely a fairy tale, but a community's enduring memory. The Piper also remains a powerful modern metaphor. In journalism, politics, and cultural critique, the term Pied Piper is often used to describe charismatic figures who lead groups, willingly or unwittingly, toward uncertain ends. The story's themes of persuasion, betrayal, and consequence are as relevant in the 21st century as they were in 1284. A quiet ending. As you imagine Hamelin at dusk, centuries ago, picture the silent street where no music plays. Picture the parents lighting candles in their homes each June 26th. Picture the stained glass window catching the last light of the setting sun, casting colored figures of a piper and a line of children across the church floor. The story does not end with answers. It ends with questions that linger. Who was the piper? Where did the children go? Why did this event carve such a deep mark on Hamelin's identity? And perhaps most poignantly, what does it say about us that we continue to tell and retell this story, not just as a curiosity of medieval folklore, but as something that still echoes with human truth? The piper's tune may have faded long ago, but its rhythm remains, not in the streets of Hamelin, but in the collective imagination of generations still walking quietly behind him into history.